So the single target damage for this build is absolutely ungodly, leveraging the hell out of both Hammer of the Ancients and, most particularly, Deathblow to absolutely delete enemy elites and enemy bosses in just ridiculous time. Extremely powerful stuff. It also boasts some pretty damn good AoE clearing as well by specializing into Iron Maelstrom as our ultimate, which was recently buffed, by the way, in a patch just the other day. So yeah, this is the build that I am using to blast my way through Sigil Nightmare Dungeons, currently at level 73, speeding my way to level 74 and beyond, and it's going great. So yeah, this video is going to cover the build, the gem priorities, all of that good stuff. So the two key aspects you're going to be needing for this build are as follows. First of all, Edge Master's aspect right here, which reads skills deal up to 36%, in my case, increased damage based on your available primary resource when cast, receiving the max benefit while you have full primary resource. So this is just buffing the crap out of both Hammer and Deathblow's damage. And the next is the aspect of Encroaching Wrath, which, after spending 100 Fury, your next weapon mastery skill deals a crap ton of increased damage, and this is obviously your death blow, right? So these are the two aspects that, when combined, I mean, the amount of bonus damage you're giving to your death blow in particular, but also to your hammer, is just absolutely out of this world, and you're stacking these attacks on vulnerable enemies 99% of the time. So yeah, this is where the ridiculous one-shot potential comes in to this build, and is really the backbone of the build itself. So how do you actually get these aspects? Well, first of all, Edge Master's Dread can be attained via your codex. If I just head into the map here, the dungeon you want to clear is all the way up in Scots Glen. You want to go to the Under the Fat Goose Inn right here, and head northwest to Old Stones. Clear this dungeon and you will unlock Edge Masters in your codex. However, it is pertinent to note that the aspect of Encroaching Wrath can only be obtained from item drops. And what this means is 99% of the time, you're going to be obtaining this from the Purveyor of Curiosities to maximize your chances of getting your hands on this aspect. Now, for both Edge Masters and aspect of Encroaching Wrath, for both of those aspects, the best possible item you can roll on at the Obol's vendor is gloves. This will give you the highest possible chance of rolling into these aspects. Oh my god, okay, never mind. There you go. We actually got it. Like, it's a relatively low roll, but still, we actually got it, and obviously this would double if we were to put this on our two-handed weapon, which is why I like it quite a bit. So yeah, roll on gloves if you want the empowered version of these aspects, and again, it is the only way to get the aspect of Encroaching Wrath. You will also notice that we are specialized into Iron Maelstrom for our ultimate ability, and the reason for this is that the cooldown was very recently knocked down from 1 minute down to 45 seconds, which is already kind of ridiculous, but when you take this talent here, the skill here, into account as well, Supreme Iron Maelstrom, it just goes absolutely off the chain, right? Dealing direct damage to an enemy after swapping weapons reduces Iron Maelstrom's cooldown by 1 second. This results in an Iron Maelstrom that is off cooldown extremely often, right? You can blow the ultimate, and the rate at which the cooldown is ticking down, yeah, it's never a 45-second cooldown. It's more like 20 or 25 seconds, sometimes even much less than that, depending on attack speed, and we're going to get into that in just a little bit as well. So, how exactly does this build play? Well, first of all, you're going to be swapping weapons all the time. That is kind of core to this build. It's the entire original idea behind the build, and so that does mean that if you open up your skills right here, you want to scroll on down and make sure that all of your damaging abilities are set to be using different weapons. If I just hit my middle mouse button here, I can actually cycle through which weapon is being used when I attack with a certain skill, and as such, we have Hammer obviously using our bludgeoning weapon, we have Deathblow using our slashing weapon, in this case an axe, and Lunging Strike obviously using our dual wield. So that way, we are switching through our weapons constantly, right? And that is what feeds into the build, and everything is kind of built around that, as you're about to see. And so with that, I think it's about time to actually run through the build itself, but do make sure to stick around even after this, because we're going to cover what other aspects we are running that really supplement this build so well. We're starting off with Lunging Strike. The mobility that this thing provides is just second to none. It's really incredible stuff. We've actually pumped 5 points at this stage into Hammer of the Ancients, plus some extra item contribution there, as you can see. Hammer of the Ancients, yeah, amazing. This can also work with Upheaval too. They're a little bit interchangeable, but hey, I just prefer Hammer of the Ancients. If I scroll on down a bit, obviously we go into the shouts. They're just fantastic. They're great for survivability. They're great for fury generation. They're great for building Fortify with Rallying Cry. Yeah, so they're awesome. We also make sure to fully buff those guys. We dump 5 points as well into good old Deathblow. Spam some points here into things like No Mercy and Pit Fighter. Pit Fighter for just increased damage, and No Mercy for increased critical strike chance against immobilized, stunned, or slowed enemies. And that is why we also put 1 point into Hamstring, so our bleeding effects will slow enemies by 10%, which counts as a crowd control, meaning we will basically always have access to No Mercy. How are we applying a bleeding effect, I hear you ask? Well, that's one of the aspects that we're going to be covering in just a little bit, guys. So make sure to stay tuned for that part of the video. Scrolling on down here, we have Fury's Impulse, which is each time you swap weapons, we're gaining 6 extra Fury. So yeah, Fury generation for this build is really just not that much of a problem. Once the ball gets rolling, you're grand. You'll basically never be Fury starved and pretty much always max. And I also put a lot of investment into these later two-handed talents right here. Things like lucky hits, having a chance to stun enemies. I just think that this is grand. We're spamming hammer so much with our bludgeoning weapons that this is triggering pretty often. Wallop, dealing extra damage to vulnerable and stunned enemies, as well as heavy-handed, giving that extra critical strike damage with our two-handed weapons, which, yeah, is where like all of our damage is coming from. So good stuff. Before I go into the Paragon board, however, I will just go over the aspects real quick. So first of all, what I will say is don't neglect your defensive aspects. This kind of goes for every build in the game, but we have many ways here of just generating Fortify extremely quickly. So we have maximum Fortify very quickly as soon as an engagement begins. But I will cover this legendary first, which is imprinted right here, with which aspect? Berserk Ripping. Whenever you deal direct damage while berserking, inflict a bunch of that base damage dealt as additional bleeding damage over 5 seconds. So that's how we're applying our bleed. It's just guaranteeing that our opponents constantly have a CC effect applied to them, so we're benefiting from a lot of extra modifiers as they count as crowd control, right? Next up, we have a bunch of attack speed imprints right here, right? We got some goddamn rapid aspect here, which is imprinted. Basic attack skills gain bonus attack speed, and we also have accelerating aspect right here, which is critical strikes with your core skills. So our hammer increases our attack speed by a bunch for 5 seconds. And attack speed honestly feels so key on this build. I've really been underrating it until recently, but now that I've got these couple of attack speed aspects kind of keyed in, the rate at which we are spamming through all of our different abilities is just making our Fury generation go absolutely through the roof. And it's resetting the cooldown on Iron Maelstrom ridiculously fast, because we're cycling through abilities like 15, 20, 30, sometimes 40% faster when all of these things come together. It's just absolutely ludicrous, and the build does feel a little bit cumbersome without at least one bonus attack speed aspect, so I would say to kind of throw that into the mix. Yeah, so you don't feel like you're moving in slow motion, you know what I'm saying? Now, I should also note as well, ere we depart, is that aspect of Berserk Ripping, as well as accelerating and rapid aspects, again, these all show up most commonly on gloves. So if you're going to be rolling your O-balls at the gambling vendor, just be rolling on gloves. Gloves just give everything you need to kind of make this build tick. You know what I'm saying? Now, I'm probably a little bit too late to add this into the video, but I will have the skill build link down below in the video description if you do actually want to go check it out. There'll be a link down there to take you directly to the build. But before we wrap up, we do have blue gems in armor, because my build at least is relying on Fortified as my key defensive tool, I guess, to keep myself alive. So the blue gems just make sense in my gear. Skulls in armor skulls in your jewelry, because skulls, giving armor is just so powerful. And we have critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies in all of our weapons, because we're critting our asses off and enemies are always vulnerable. I'll also quickly go into the Paragon tree real quick and just kind of show a few glyphs that I am planning on running here. The first is actually Mortal Draw. This is just extremely powerful, I think. Maybe like the second most powerful that I'd recommend for this build, but bunch of bonus damage with skills that swap to new weapons. Yeah, you can scale this one out of control, plus 100% damage, We're swapping to new abilities all the time. We're swapping to new weapons all the time with our skills, so this is just kind of a no-brainer. Next up, we also have the exploit glyph, because obviously vulnerable damage is the most valuable source of damage pretty much in the game. So yeah, exploiting the hell of that is going to be very important. And obviously the additional bonus for this, extremely potent. When an enemy is damaged by you, they become vulnerable for 3 seconds. Yeah, they're going to die in those 3 seconds 100% of the time, most of the time. And yeah, for my second glyph spot over here that I'm sort of slowly working my way towards while picking up a bunch more vulnerable damage over here too, we're probably going to be going into Aya. I'm going to give this one a try and see how it feels. I currently have it at level 13, so it's almost ready to go and be slammed in straight away at level 15, so that's going to be great. And this is for every 5 strength purchase within range. It's going to give us more damage while berserking. So yeah, any kind of aspects that help you increase, or rather, for my variation of the build, any aspects that are going to help me maintain berserking time are going to help out quite a bit as well. I should also note that if you do not have access to the exploit glyph just yet, then I would recommend pulling some points out of Hammer of the Ancients and putting more points into Pressure Point. I have 1 point in Pressure Point for some reason. I could probably redistribute this somewhere else and get a bit more value elsewhere, but hey, I'll just leave it in there for now for whatever, for those edge cases where I don't just kill somebody in 3 seconds and I maybe need to apply vulnerable, but Pressure Point is a relatively consistent way to get vulnerable up on your targets and yeah, hit them with those big 1 million plus, death blow hits and have a grand old time. So that is the build. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you also enjoyed. Make sure you like and all of that stuff. Let me know how you would adapt the build yourself if you're running something similar. And yeah, catch all of you guys just a tad bit later.